So I was telling people just now that the last time that we actually had a My Place Cafe event for poetry was at toward like April 24th. So I feel like it's been a minute since I last done something like this, even though I've been still doing poetry events here and there in between. But yeah, I don't know why I'm feeling all nervous today. It's like whatever. Hello YouTube and welcome all who are watching. I'm Jesse Tovar and this is Afternoon Poetry at My Place Cafe. My Place Cafe is located in Steve Square, 2057 North Los Robles Avenue, Suite 10, Pasadena, California, at the corner of Woodbury and Los Robles. My Place is open every day from 7:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. Since My Place Cafe is still open during this live stream, stop by and get a coffee, cold brew, or latte. Above My Place Cafe is the Zen Den, a yoga studio ran by Jody Smith. Jody is also the founder of Magic Melon and Mama, an urban apothecary lotions and potions herbal product line, aka Wellness for the Culture. Learn more about these and other yoga sessions, including purchasing some Magic Melon and Mama products at the zendenla.com. Although walk-ins are welcomed, please be advised there is a 15% limit for each class, and space priority will be given to those who have signed up for a class in advance online at Zenden's website or the Class Pass app. Since I did a Soulflow class back in February, 15 people make sense. When I took yoga at Cal Poly Pomona, there were roughly 70 classmates in one giant room. Luckily, we were distanced from one another. That was like 2018. Well, it's not National Poetry Month anymore, but since I run an author reading series with Latanya Smith, the cafe owner, we basically celebrate poetry every single month. I will say that to please not expect events like this every single month, guaranteed, because things do happen. Life happens. I keep that potentiality in my head now that we have all faced a pandemic and the restrictions that came along with it for everyone's safety. This afternoon's featured poet is a popular professor from CSUN. He is known for placing scholarship from Asian American studies at the forefront and champions the successes of Asian American Pacific Islander college students who may have sometimes felt that earning a bachelor's degree or higher level degree is downright unattainable. Um, let's see here. I'm trying to move on here. Aquino went to CSUN. He teaches at CSUN and lives around that area. He is proud of being from the SFB. In Dreamlog of a Needful Heart from his chapbook, selections from Dreamlogs and other chronicles, the narrator says they are called a chronicler for they have seen so much in a region, presumably San Fernando Valley, while never traveling all over the world. To be fair, there's so much to do in the Alta Pasa area, and even like San Fernando Valley. Was there like I've been going. I was there like earlier this week and last week. You probably don't have to travel if you don't want to. For instance, did you know there are free live drawing classes at the Outdoor Zortian Ranch? I'm actually thinking of about taking one class this summer. Where we're at right now, we can get to the SFB shortly. People don't believe me when I say it's a 20-minute drive to Tia Chuchas from here. Speaking of Tia Chuchas, Aquino read with Luis J. Rodriguez virtually Four Voices of California, presented by Joseph Will Podcast and Nervous Coast Press in 2020. That event was virtually hosted there. That was the first time I was exposed to Aquino, the poet. He said he's a warrior for the ethnic studies tribe by CSUN. He points out that in Filipino American history, he learned the cross pollination of Filipinos all over. Aquino describes his writing as Filipino English lyricism. Tatlong Handog sa Julita from One Love is shown in both Filipino and English for reference purposes. So much can be done with this poem performatively. Before a month passed since Voices California won, Mike Sonskin and I organized a poetry reading panel for Express Mi Cultura in Monrovia, and I was shocked to find out Aquino was selected by Sonskin. Mike told me all the poets in that card are his besties. A month after that event, I read at the open mic portion for Mike Sonskin and friends at Miller Room at Long Beach Public Library. Aquino was one of the headliners, and he admitted that he was COVID positive when he read for the Express Mi Cultura card. I was impressed that despite being critically ill, he managed to give an amazing poetic performance to the virtual Old Town Monrovia audience back in November 2020. Again, the pandemic is why I avoid language such as every week or every month guaranteed when I advertise or when we advertise all our events here at My Place Cafe, I would hate to have to say something is not happening after all. With the Omicron surge of late 2021 into 2022, I was forced to say postponed, canceled, not happening, even though I avoided saying My Place Cafe has events all the time. Going back real quick to Sonskin and Friends, this event series is fortunate to have almost everyone who read at Express Mi Cultura. And right now, one more from that card is about to read to us. So this afternoon, Latanya Smith, Jody Smith, and I welcome Allan Aquino.
Well, I guess cheers and hello to everybody listening. I want to begin by raising my tea in tribute to the mighty My Place Cafe. It's a tremendous honor to be here for the very first time, and I've long been an admirer of this reading series. So I do want to express thanks to Jesse for hosting and my other colleagues present today. And it's a tremendous honor to be here at last in person and to share some of my work with those of you listening today. Now, for those of us in the audience, I've taken the liberty of passing out hard copies of the poems I intend to read today. It's not quite a chapbook, but it's old school paper poetry. I am a primarily a poet for the page, so a lot of the writing that I share is intended to be read on a page. I use very specific, I call it a visual rhyme style. My part of my work has been influenced by all kinds of influences, including music and elements of deaf culture, which compels me to put a kind of visual element to my writing. But I also happen to write in a language that enables the poetry to be read out loud. So I'm going to share 5 poems today, and I will provide some supplemental commentary on them as I go along. So the first poem that I'm going to share today is entitled Broken on the Wheel. A little bit of background of this poem. The title comes from 2 influences. I wrote this poem in 1997 when I was a 23-year-old senior at CSUN, and the image of the wheel has a double meaning. I learned in my Africana studies classes, they're called Pan-African studies, there was a method of corporal punishment in the Spanish colonies against enslaved people who were considered seditious, and it would be referred to as being broken on a sort of torture wheel. The wheel also has a secondary image or influence from Buddhism, referring to the cycle, the wheel of birth and rebirth, which can only be resolved by adhering to the wheel of Dharma and righteousness. So it is a poem about materialism and other things. Interesting thing about this poem is, even though I wrote it in 1997, it eventually evolved into a kind of spoken word piece, which I was able to perform at the J. Paul Getty Center 20 years ago, 2002. I was a member of a group called L.A. Encanto, and we produced a CD, and we, for a brief time, a couple of years, went on tour promoting our featured poets and musicians. And this poem evolved into a kind of theatrical spoken word piece. So, yes, from 1997, my first poem today, Broken on the Wheel. The days are of wheel, part light, part shadow. This morning I'm reborn, sensing a dream from hours earlier where nothing died and I was built for eternity. Then I awaken like a tiger, refit with piston legs. Today, I will hunt for true beauty in a box. Joy, love, belief. I roam with my kin lulled by the neon of the Northridge Fashion Center. According to Tibetan mythology, they give us those glossy bead bracelets, you know. We are reborn eon after eon in cycles of life and death, of wheel because of Trishna. That means expediency, pride, appetite. Such a great philosophy. It gives those Buddha candles in my bathroom this cool vibe. But anyway, today I want an AR with a heat shield. Say hello to my little friend. Or maybe a new netbook. I can see it now. Terabytes of power awaiting at Best Buy. Or how about that black cherry ES with the chrome rims today? That would be something. I can't even remember how I got here. Tonight, it'll take forever to get some rest, and tomorrow, most of the time, I will ponder what to score. Or maybe I will stare at the moon, remembering how it stirred my mind as a child. Suddenly, there's this sudden pang as if my spine has snapped. But that doesn't stop my fade to sleep. The days are a wheel, part light, part shadow. Like death after 365 revolutions, and yet life is all the same. Um, I grew up in a Catholic family, but as an Asian American Studies professor, I learned about and ultimately became acquainted with Buddha Dharma. So I do consider myself a Buddhist as well. And even though life is a cycle of birth and rebirth, suffering and joy, it is possible to transcend the cycle by understanding your interconnectedness and your interdependency between all people, all living beings. And that's what they mean by enlightenment, and it's attainable by anybody. So, yeah. I will next share probably the most recent poem I wrote. I recently read this at the book launch from my dear friend Tracy Kato Kiriyama. And yeah, this is a poem about my hometown. The title of this poem is Find Me in the PC, A Memory in Three Parts. Now, the phrase in the title, Find Me in the PC, that is that is an excerpt from a lyric by the rapper Hobson, Michael Jamal Hobson, from his song Panorama City. And that is what this poem is about, my hometown. Find me in the PC, a memory in three parts. Roscoe Boulevard, east of Brimfield, is thick with apartments, malls, and clinics. 24/7, the whoosh of commuters, the bellow of leaf blowers, the hydraulic screech and beep and thud of industrial trucks pulling in, dumping, backing up. This is Los Angeles not long past 2019. Memories of seeing the movie Blade Runner at the Americana on Van Nuys at Parthenia in 1982 with your dead parents still traumatize you. Your existence is more cyberpunk than cyberpunk, high tech yet low brow, where studio units start at 1,700 a month, where most can't even afford to live in a building with ink slaps, bombs, bato local tags on the walls, lamps, sidewalks, where the homeless shantytown residents by the 405 freeway survive a tuberculosis outbreak and a COVID-19 hot zone by way of charity and 5G mobile devices. Deep into the night, smooth grind skateboards. That's the graffiti writers throwing up heaven pieces by the abandoned Montgomery Ward. There's firecrackers, a scream of Spanish profanities, pistolas, the constant Doppler of police choppers and fire engines. You remember a line from the first rap record you heard at the Music Land Sam Goody, Panorama Mall, sometime after you saw Blade Runner. Can't take the smell, can't take the noise, got no money to move out, I guess I got no choice. It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep going under. And this is your reality too. Nonetheless, you find a music in all the orchestrated sound of Panorama City. It's an ivory noise of sea waves swelling and crashing like a warning storm. And the message to your enemies is, we are from right here. You may say it's nothing, but we know home is everything. Live solitary by the vent center of three gang turfs. This street, and that street. All of them beefing with San Trece, Marasabatucha, Northside 18th Street, Barrio Van Nuys. Homicides are rare, but then again, so is pedestrian safety. This place is not a combat zone, but it's still dangerous. One night, you count the gunshots in your head, one, two, on until you reach 15. You wonder if some toy boy or some slipping ass kid got hit. Your flatmates look to you for safety. People were murdered by machete in the apartment by the mission hospital. In other words, your knowledge of Filipino martial arts is useful. You may have to protect your neighbors with your life. Meanwhile, vocabularies blend like Van Gogh's paint strokes whenever you Uber east to North Hollywood. Those business signs in Mexican, Boricua, Salvi, Spanish, Vietnamese, Thai, Tagalog, Bienvenido, Sawati Kru, Chow Ang, Tuloy po kayo, tacos po kamo, from Sepulveda to Coldwater. You see all this because you walk or carpool everywhere since A, you can't afford a car, or B, handle its insurance, gas, and maintenance costs. C, survived a bad accident and got screwed by State Farm, plus you're too rattled to drive. D, there's no parking after 4 p.m. And E, if you're out after 8 by the wrong spot, you likely get jacked the F down. So over the decades, you've been hit up, threatened, stabbed, yet never showed terror. You near choked on your own puke, bathing a sadness away. You burned enough weed till your lungs were dried mango. Hell, by Thanksgiving 2020, you survived COVID, and now you're crippled. 3. And yet, amidst it all, you never let fear crush you. Keeping on, too stubborn, too samurai to die, too driven by God knows what to never despair. You'd rather die for a silent moral victory than exist like another damn skin job. You remember what Roy Batty said in Blade Runner? Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be enslaved. And then you remember summer 93, discovering in one of your animal dens lyrics from a dead language. You then remember every happy party and meal and celebration. You remember playing piano loud and hearty and your neighbors not complaining, sometimes applauding. You remember the prayers your parents taught you when you lived in that building. You remember every toy, song, and laughter. Dad, on his 2017 deathbed, said to you, have God's gift of memory. And then you remember the wisdom of an old master. You must know the strength of the place you come from. And by remembering all this, you find the peace that most outside will never know. And now you remember at last your talisman. Let a man walk alone. Let him commit no sin. Let him have few wishes, like an elephant roaming the jungle.
That reminds me of the artist you've been leaving Royal Heights yesterday.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Well, my next poem is definitely something different. My next poem is a collaborative poem which I co-wrote with a dear friend and former colleague of mine. I don't know if she's watching, but I want to give a shout out to Ms. Zulay E. Maldonado, Zulay Elaine Maldonado. She was once an American Sign Language interpreter at Cal State Northridge for the National Center on Deafness. And 10 years ago, for National Poetry Month, I performed this poem in tandem with Zulay. Now, Zulay is an American Sign Language interpreter, and we worked together in the spring of 2011, and inspired by the semester I spent with her, we became friends the following spring, 2012, and ultimately, we performed this piece at Tuesday Night Cafe in Little Tokyo. It was at this event that I met Professor Mike Sonkson for the first time, whom Jesse, our host, had addressed in his very generous introduction. And this poem that Zulay and I wrote, she refers to it as a collateral spoken word poem. So you're going to have to do a little bit of imagination here. As I recite the poem, imagine an American Sign Language interpreter, in this case Zulay, center stage at the forefront of the audience, performing the text live in American Sign Language. So if you could see the page, the way that the stanzas are designed, they're designed to have like a visual, like carving shape to them, kind of like sound waves on an equalizer. And again, I use what I call visual rhyme, in which I repeat like letters or syllables or words at the beginning of sentences. It's a poem that's meant to be visually accessible, orally accessible, and performatively accessible. And that was driven by my inspiration working with the National Center on Deafness. I myself am not fluent in American Sign Language, although I can fingerspell and I do know some basic signs. Um, this poem, which is about being a professor in tandem with an interpreter, or a poet in tandem with an interpreter, is entitled Ghost and the Dancer, 6 Lessons, a collateral spoken word poem co-written by Zuley E. Maldonado to be performed with an American Sign Language interpreter. Ghost and the Dancer, 6 Lessons. 1. As one of the most recognizable figures of pop culture history, Bruce Lee, the great Sifu, famously said, absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, use what is essential, use only what is entirely your own. 2. When it comes to classy, your passport doesn't matter. Smart is beautiful, and it doesn't just depend on books. The question is, how deeply can you see what's right in front of you? 3. I thought ASL interpreters spelled out every word and syllable. I assumed they ensured deaf students heard everything, that they were translators or walking subtitles, but oh, I was stupid and wrong. I know a lot, yet understand so little. I'm a professor, spoiled and privileged. I have no answers, just a mouthful of words, and I never know when I've done anything good. Ideas pass on like ghosts. I say lots of things to people who will lose most of what I've said, but if her dance proves true, they will never forget how we made them feel. 4. I first check the roster. I look around, steady as a security camera, counting the students who showed up. I've outlined my ideas on the board. I take a breath, but before I start, I make sure she's in the right chair. Her arms need room. Time slows like a dream. I see the copper curve of her cheek, her hair like an elegant mane, her forward gaze. She's ready, and I find my confidence. Her fingers cast spells, her performance sways, crashes like waves on shorelines. The heat of tango quickens her pace. Our students are fascinated, and she finds her inspiration. Then our fingers cast spells. Our performance sways, crashes like waves on shorelines. The heat of tango quickens our pace. Our students are fascinated, and we find our inspiration. 5. There's more to the world than what we read about it. There's beautiful things we fail to see all around us. The answer is more obvious than we know. Kindness is wealth. Love is power. 6. Like the great Sifu said, there are countless ways to live out loud. Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless like water. But when you pour water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You pour water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You pour water into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. Thank you very much.
Wow. Yeah.
So I want to give a shout out to my colleagues who are also American Sign Language interpreters in addition to Zulay. So Lita and Angeline. Zulay is currently on the East Coast, so it would be nice to do that poem again sometime with a live interpreter. But hopefully, the vocal delivery on the page gives like an adequate taste. So as I'd said, I had read that poem for the first time 10 years ago, 2012, for National Poetry Month, April. And it was at that very performance that I met Mr. Mike Songson, Professor Mike Songson, for the very first time. And the rest is history, as they say. He's become an invaluable friend to so many of us, including myself. So I believe Mike might be participating with the graduation ceremony at Woodbury today. So on that note, cheers to the class of 2022. I myself, indeed, if I may, because I'm a professor as well as a poet. For all of you graduating this year, there are no weak people in the class of 2022 because you are among the strongest ever, knowing what you had to survive and endure, especially during the past 2 years. For those of you who are graduating today, I salute you, and your victory is a victory for all of us. And to all of my colleagues who are currently at graduation ceremonies, I'm with you in spirit. And on that note, this is a poem of tribute that I wrote to Professor Songson. And as many of us know, Professor Songson's signature poem is I Am Alive in Los Angeles.
Oh,
Yeah. And in my own imagination, I like to fantasize that Professor Songson and I, and our other colleague with us in spirit today, Professor Maestra Louis Vetresto, who had also read here, we are like the Justice League. Mike is Superman, I'm obviously Batman, and y'all know who Wonder Woman is. W's Wonder Woman, Wu-Tang, Louis Vetresto. We are the Justice League Trinity. And anyway, without anyway, this poem is a poem of tribute to Mike, and it's entitled To Live and Defy Death in LA. As opposed to live and die in LA, this is to live and defy death in LA. From Mike Songson. I am alive in Los Angeles. In a league of poet professors, I'm the dark knight of Northridge. Signaled I hurry from my Panorama City cave to rally my youth to a war against mental injustice. And then there is Professor Songson, not just a poet, but the poet, springing from the river's rhizomes, zooming the capillaries of our blade-run metropolis, our Ubermensch, the man of tomorrow. Whether by page or stage, his words fill your solitudes, swift, breathless, carrying you along through space-time. You are awed, left speechless, with kisses of history, geography, place, the homes within your home. You find life by the way of the life of your kin, and you are grateful. As Carlos Bolosan wrote to Chris Mansalves, they are afraid, my brother. They are afraid of our mighty fists. They are afraid of the magnificence of our works, my brother. They are even afraid of our songs of love, my brother. I am alive in Los Angeles. I am still alive in Los Angeles. Shout out to Professor Thompson. And finally, my last poem, which was kindly mentioned by Jesse, our host, is a bilingual poem, the first bilingual poem I've ever shared. I am not as fluent in Filipino or Tagalog language as I hope to be. I would say that my fluency is probably that of a child, so I can hold down a conversation. But I'm developing it. And this is a poem I wrote in honor of my grandmother. The month of May is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, of course. Happy Heritage Month to all of us. And it's a poem that I wrote for my late grandmother. Her name was Julita Arabalog Gamalinda, and she raised me, taught me how to read and write, and was a part of my life until she unceremoniously passed in the fall of 1993. That was a very difficult challenge to live with and to process, but the end of my grandmother's life in the fall of 1993 was the beginning of my destiny, as I say. It was in 1993 when my grandmother was enduring her final days that I began taking poetry seriously. I started writing poetry in earnest when I was 17. That's when I picked up the pen and never stopped. I'm going to be 48 in a couple of weeks, so I've been writing nonstop for over 30 years. And I did not take myself truly seriously until I was about 19, especially around that formative time in 1993. It just so happened that after I lost my grandmother, after she unceremoniously passed away, I happened to be taking my very first Asian American Studies class, the very class that I myself have moderated the past 20 years. So the end of my grandmother's life was the beginning of my destiny, and the day of her death was the first day of her immortality, as I like to say it. In honor of my grandmother, in honor of my ancestors, and in honor of my people in the Philippines who are going through a very difficult transitional period with the national elections there. You know what I'm talking about. This is a poem written in Filipino and English. The Tagalog verses are followed by English language interpretation. And this poem is entitled Tatlong Handog sa Kulita, or Three Postcards for Lola. Lola meaning grandmother. And by the way, for those of you who understand or are fluent in Spanish, you will hear that in Filipino language, a great number of our vocabulary words are actually of Spanish and Nahuatl origin. So words like Lola, Decada, as I look through the uh, poem here for the Spanish words, Parque, Esmeralda, Ciudad, Santo Jose. Um, you will hear a lot of you will hear a number of Spanish words in Filipino. So anyway, here's the poem. Tatlong handog sa kulita, three postcards for Lola. Noong sa buhay, ikaw ay punong guro at makata, nanay ng nanay ko. Sa wakas, mga dekada mula nang umalis ka, nahanap kayo ulit. Kaya nahanap ang kaluluwa ko, kabilang sa mga lihim sa pagitan ng linya ng maliwanag mong mukha. In life, you were a professor and a poet, mother of my mother. At last, decades since your departure, I find you again. Thus, I find my own soul among the secrets between the lines of your luminous face. Ang kamay mo ang nakakahawak sa kamay ko, nakakaaliw. Ang araw ay nagsisimula sa mga kwento at paglalakad sa parke. Ang mundo sa mata ko ay malawak at esmeralda. Ang mahal mo'y pagiging verde ng lahat. Ang damit ni Santo Jose binigay sa iyo sa panaginip, ang gulay sa hardin mo, ang mga 7-up topping ng aming tapsilog, ang mga kanta ng tarlac palaging nasa iyong puso bilang napunta kami sa maraming mga aliniwanag na siyudad. Your hand holds mine warmly. Evanston days begin with stories and walks in the park. The world, to my child eyes, is vast and emerald. How you love the greenness of things. The finery St. Joseph in a dream bequeaths you. Your vegetable garden, our 7-up cans during lunchtime. The songs of Tarlac ever in your heart as we come upon many bright skylines. Sa konting salita, alam ko ang simoy ng hangin, ang daan nito, ang ritmo nito. Hindi ito'y taghoy o paglalakbay. Kabilang sa lahat ng bagay na dapat gawin, ang buong mundo nararamdaman mas verde, mas simple. Tuwang dumadaan ako narito. In so many words, I know now the breeze, its way, its rhythm. This is neither lamentation nor a travelogue. Amidst everything I must carry on, the whole world feels greener and simpler every time I move. Um, Thank you very much indeed for listening. It's been a tremendous honor. I hope you appreciated what I had to share today. Yes, thank you very much. Lastly, I want to say thanks again to our gracious host Jesse and to the mighty My Place Cafe. Congratulations again to those of you graduating to the class of 2022. And until we meet again, everybody, thank you for listening.
Oh, do you have any questions? Yeah.
Oh, sure. I guess Q&A time. I'd be happy to.
Yes, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Really appreciate you. The first time I heard you perform was with Mike Thompson was there as well. It was at Battery Books.
Oh, yes.
Years ago. Yeah.
2019.
I think it's still around. Before.
Battery Books?
The store's still there, but I don't think that he was doing a lot of poetry readings.
Before the pandemic, yeah.
Yeah, pre-pandemic.
That was 2019, yeah.
Yes, for sure. I was really intrigued by The Ghost and the Dancer.
Yes.
Because of the ASL interpreter. And I was going to ask you about that, but you explained, how you met the interpreter. Just sort of a comment, people who are hearing, sometimes the only exposure we get to ASL is if there's like a news report on television and then you see the speaker in the center and the interpreter off to the side. So to hear you say that the interpreter is the one who is front and center,
yes.
Giving us the story was something really different. I want to ask, so where were you? Were you back behind or? Yeah.
Well, yes, indeed. Well, first of all, I met Zulay because she was an interpreter for my class, and she had this incredible rapport with our deaf students. And I had the impression that she and our deaf students were like friends who knew each other for a long time. But the truth is, they never met each other until the moment they first met. There was this immediate rapport, and that's part of the magnetism and skill that Zulay has. When she interprets, it's a complete performance head to toe. The gestures of her face, she has to enunciate her words and express with her eyes.
Yeah.
And yeah, she is listening and absorbing and recording everything I say. It goes through her like magnificent genius multitasking brain, and then it's presented to the audience of two students. And her style of interpretation, it's so visual and graceful. And I'm not exoticizing her in any way. I told her, it's like, no, I'm not. But the way you move, it's so, it's so like magical, and it conveys the emotion that I try to convey. But even more so, like when I make a really emotional point in lecture, because I'm very nerdy, she will convey the enthusiasm with her gestures. And I said to her, it's like, it's magnificent. It's like water, the way you move. Thus the references to water. And she and I are both Bruce Lee fans and stuff. So the reference to Bruce Lee. And we had an immediate rapport and became friends. So a year later, when we reconnected and decided, you know what, I've been thinking about the work we did. I wrote a poem, like a first draft of a poem, and I showed it to her. And we both came up, what if we do this live? Let's give this a try. Because she is a performer too. She used to be a singer in a pop group. Latin pop group in New York called Mia, M-I-A-H. Check them out. They used to had really good music back in the early 2000s. So she is a performer in addition to an ASL artist. Now, the staging of the reading, and hopefully this can happen again, with Zulay or with another interpreter. She was center stage, and as an interpreter, she is, I don't want to say lip syncing, but she is enunciating the text. And I kind of stand off in the corner in the back, like in the shadows. So I have the microphone and I'm doing my thing. I have the paper in my hand, but she is in the front and center in the spotlight, and she's performing like water, like an interpretive dance. And when we performed that piece, there was actually a table of about maybe 10 deaf students. And it was wonderful because they caught nuances that the rest of the audience didn't capture. They were like giggling and laughing because Zule would make like jokes. And there's this one gag where, as Zule was interpreting, I walk in front of her and take center stage because I'm the arrogant professor, and she has to like gesture me off stage. Yeah, so there's a gag. I don't remember exactly where it was. I think it's the line "I was stupid and wrong," where I walk in front of her and I'm standing in front of her, and then she kind of just taps me on the shoulder and says, "Did you move?" So then in ASL, and then we continue the poem, and the deaf students, the deaf members, they were cracking up because there was a nuance there that only they could see, but the rest of the audience was aware, and that's how that worked. So finally, at the very end of the poem, we are in tandem, side by side. So that's how it was. But she is truly like the centerpiece of the poem. So my attempt at vocal delivery, it doesn't do it complete justice. But that's how that worked. Yeah, if only we had a video of it. I think she had a video, but I don't know if she has it anymore.
No, but I was gonna say too, like during the pandemic, like especially in the early days when they had those news conferences like all over, that's when I paid more attention to like the ASL performers or interpreters because especially with Zoom, you would sometimes see them like on a separate screen.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh well, sometimes my attention went to the interpreter instead of like the person that's talking,
Right.
you know what I mean? Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you very much. Thank you. The pleasure was
When you
honor was mine.
mentioned Evanston in the last poem,
Oh.
your grandmother is at Evanston, Illinois?
Yes, indeed. I was born in Chicago. Yeah, I was
Okay.
born downtown. I lived there till I was about 5.
What,
and,
Chicago, really?
Yeah. I was born downtown. And I was there till about 5 or 6, but I still have very happy memories of Chicago. I can't wait to go back. Chicago's always going to be a part of who I am.
Latoya too, she was born in Chicago.
Oh yeah, that's right. And yeah, many happy memories. The downtown skyline, Lakeshore Drive, still in my memory. And Evanston, that's where I lived with my grandmother and my parents. So my memories of walking, the green hills of Evanston with her, very profound in my memory.
For those that can't see me on YouTube, I'm grabbing all the cushions because my cushion will be about to close soon, like in about 50 more minutes. So I'm gonna do that real quick. I'll be on the camera soon. Don't worry. Yeah.
All right. Cheers and thanks
Yeah.
for listening.
Oh, thank you. And how's the breeze with that AC?
Oh, it's perfect. Oh, actually, it's a very hot day, but actually, right here, right now, the weather couldn't feel more perfect. This is wonderful. So, hope you're all staying cool out there.
As I said, Alan, thank you for reading. Thank you for making this event a reality. Let's see here. Normally, I say like the social media handles for the poets. I'm not sure. So, how can people follow you? I mean, I know your handle for Instagram, but or how? Yeah, how can people get in contact with you?
Well, I did have a WordPress. The address is there. Allan Aquino. If you want to.
Yeah, I'll definitely write that down on the description. Yeah, for sure. Alrighty, so tomorrow, Ideas Aubrey will return to my place cafe. May is his birthday month. On May 21st, precisely, but tomorrow will be the birthday party, like an open birthday party. There'll be a couple of readers, including Ashton Cynthia Clark, who's here in the audience, myself, and I believe Ruth and Cyrus Epabody, who I'm actually happy to see them, read here at my Place Cafe. They were here when Maya Alexandria read back in November. And then I also believe Arthur Kazakian's going to read too. So the people I just mentioned, they're part of a group with Ideas Aubrey called Mammoth Poetry. And attended and read at one of their reading series called Black Poets Matter, and they are really awesome poets. They put together amazing events. And then when I started the series, they were one of the first people I reached out to, and I'm glad they're here now and being a part of what we do here at My Place Cafe. So that's gonna happen tomorrow at 1 p.m. to celebrate Idea's birthday, and he is getting a cake from Nicey's Delights, who was here earlier today for the My Curated Favorites pop-up. So I know I tried the cake last time. Well, both of us tried the cake last time. And it's very delicious. It's a recipe that her grandmother passed down to Nicey. So very honored that she's keeping her grandmother's memory alive through cooking. So that's all for the rest of the weekend. We hope you enjoy the rest of the weekend. My Place Cafe would like to say happy birthday to Christian Kid. It's his birthday today. He has also been featured in his reading series. Please remember to make my place your place.